Hey, fans and stalkers, it's Erica, your host of Disruptor Politics. Testing, test, 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 testing, 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 testing. Hey, fans and stalkers. Hey, fans and stalkers, this is Erica, your host of Disruptor Politics. Hi, fans and stalkers, this is Erica, your host of Disruptor Politics. I meant to record something the last few days, but I got super busy over the weekend and then I lost my voice. So we can't record a podcast. We don't really have a voice. I thought you might be tired of hearing my scratchy, scratchy voice after several minutes. But I have a lot to talk about today. So, like a lot of raging liberals, I attended this weekend's No Kings rally, march, protest, whatever you want to call it, in Sacramento at the state capitol building. I really like the organizers, and Indivisible, I believe, was the organization that pulled all of this together for the most part. And, a lot of people came out. I think it was estimated that 7,000 people showed up, and the energy was pretty good. I just have to say, though, as someone who attends protests and marches regularly, it doesn't really feel like a protest to me because it's something that you don't have to, but that you register for, you provide your email address. And usually, protests, in my experience, are in direct response to something that has just happened and they're more organic. At most, they might be planned a couple of days in advance and just to give people enough time and notice to attend. And I feel like there's usually an ask. And so this rally, I will say, felt more just like a pep rally for Democrats. And in a time when the Democrats have such a low approval rating nationwide at something like 20%, I think I just do have a problem with platforming these Democrats, all these Democrats who are given time to speak when they are absolutely part of the problem and without any pushback. Let me give you some examples. So first off, I didn't hear every speech. One, there were so many people there that even when there was a speaker, you couldn't really see who it was. So you just kind of had to guess who it was based on their voice. And for part of the time, I was off to the side at this little sound stage called Ear Candy, arranged by another volunteer, and it was really fun. I had been asked to help sing some protest songs a few weeks ago, so I did that. It was kind of fun. I sang "Let It Be" the Dolly Parton version because that's in a better key for a woman. And a Pink song, and then I was asked to sing "This Land Is Your Land," and so that was fun. But then, I get off stage and I'm walking around and I'm seeing other people I know, and then I hear an announcement that Congressman Eric Swalwell is going to speak. So those of you who know me well and who have followed me for a bit know that I do not care for Eric Swalwell. I think he is absolutely one of the worst Democrats in office. Just from personal experience, personal stories, things I can't even share because they're basically shared with me in confidentiality. But as someone who used to like him back when he was new, I just feel like all he does is dunk on Trump, anti-Trump rhetoric on his social media platforms. When you try to ask him deep questions online, for instance, yeah, Eric Swalwell is one of the worst Democrats in that he is totally relying on the Republicans being so bad that voters will come back to the Democrats. and not having had to do any of the hard reflection on why Democrats lost a race they should have won in the House. All the Democrats, well, I'll say like 99% of the Democrats in office, because there are several progressive Democrats who were sounding the alarms basically. But these corporate, moderate, special interest bought Democrats like Eric Swalwell are just more concerned about their career. Eric Swalwell is not deep by any measure. If you check out his social media, it's all anti-Trump, 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 anti-Trump dunks. And he just tries to get him. And he doesn't talk about why or how the Democrats lost so many voters and how people did not come out. He hasn't said, yes, we definitely abandoned the working class. We're not giving voters something to vote for. Absolutely none of that. Now, most Dems aren't still doing that because they just refuse to admit mistakes and it will affect their careers, right? So Eric Swalwell is definitely one of those. One time, I would say the one time that I really started to decide that I don't think I like this guy was back in 2017, maybe late 2016. It was after Trump won. So it was in that window of time between when Trump won and when he was inaugurated, was when Nancy Pelosi was running for leader again. So I think she was running for minority leader because Dems had lost control of the House as well. And so that was when Congressman Tim Ryan, who, as you know, ran for Senate recently and lost, and then also is being rumored to run for governor of Ohio now. But anyhow, he came out and decided to challenge Nancy Pelosi for a leadership role. And Seth Moulton did as well. And I think someone else did. Basically, it was 3 or 4 white guys who decided to challenge Nancy Pelosi. And I remember there was a lot of pushback online, especially from women, because they thought, how dare these white men think they can challenge Nancy Pelosi? But I actually supported it at the time because Nancy Pelosi had just helped lead Democrats into a major loss. So she likes to get credit. People love to give her credit when Democrats take back the House and we get major wins, but she never gets criticism for the big losses. And that was a huge loss. And in the end, Tim Ryan got more votes by a secret ballot than predicted. So Nancy Pelosi still won. But anyway, back to Eric Swalwell. I remember him being interviewed after that vote. I remember the exact moment I was watching the TV, listening to him and realizing what he was saying was clear that he was wanting to get a chairmanship. So he was definitely supporting Nancy Pelosi, even though she had just led us into a major loss. And I can't remember specifically what he said, but I remember just after that interview thinking, this guy, I cannot trust him to represent me or the working class at all. And I mean, that sounds kind of vague, but I'm just trying to give you insight into how my mind came to that conclusion. So then later on, I think he ran for president in 2019, and I low key supported it because even though it was clear he was just trying to elevate his platform, he was running basically on gun control prevention, gun violence prevention. And as a gun violence survivor, I appreciated it, but it didn't last long, obviously, that run. And then fast forward to me just totally eye rolling at his posts because I'll just say, I don't think he's bright at all. And I'm not the only person who thinks that, even from people on the Hill. So after October 7th, he was one of a handful of Democrats who voted yes on that resolution drafted by a Republican that conflated anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. He didn't have to do it. 92 Democrats voted present, which was weak, but he voted yes. And so there was a town hall online, a virtual town hall that I attended, even though I'm not a constituent, but I just like to attend town halls around the country, either telephonically or online like that. And a woman who was a constituent of his, who was Palestinian, started to share a story about how she's lost loved ones and how her friends. They've lost like 60 family members in Gaza already. So this is just a couple months after October 7th. And she referenced that she or someone else referenced that resolution he co-sponsored. And he explained in that town hall, I think it was this town hall, that he said, well, I just thought anti-Zionism meant anti-Semitism. That's just what I was told. That's what I thought. Sir. So then this woman was telling him this whole story and how she needs help. We need help helping to end this bombardment, this attack on innocent civilians in Gaza. And she said, if it would be nice, if you could show some empathy or compassion, basically. She didn't say it just like that, but she definitely used the word empathy. And so when she was finished speaking, and she spoke for quite a bit, the first thing Eric Swalwell said was basically, if you want to have a conversation with someone, the first thing you shouldn't do is accuse them of not having empathy. And so he started to lecture her on that, not addressing anything else, but just that. So that went on for a little bit. And then this guy who got on after the woman, he said, "Look, I had another question for you, but I'm a Jewish man, and I just need to address how you treated that Palestinian constituent, basically, and how awful his response was, basically, and how he wasn't listening and more." And he just looked like a kid sitting there getting lectured by a constituent. He is. I'm just telling you, not bright. He is not a bright individual, and this is just based on personal knowledge and personal experience. And I just wish more people saw through it and how, my God, this guy, he posts more selfies than my beauty school classmates. Anytime he's going on MSNBC, he posts a selfie and says he's going to be on there in like 5 minutes. But I know these might sound like shallow, silly reasons to dislike him, but I'm just telling you, he is more concerned about his career than his constituents and doing what's best for the American people. Because if he were really concerned about winning again, he would be reflecting, especially publicly. But he's just hoping, like most other Democrats, that the Republicans are going to be so bad that voters are just going to come back to them without addressing the root of the problem as to why Democrats lost this huge election that was theirs to win. So anyhow, he got up and spoke, said some really stupid things. People were drooling and clapping all over him. And had I known he was coming in advance, I not only would have said something to organizers, but I also would have positioned myself in such a way that when he got off, I would have known, like I would have cornered him basically and talked to him. I did bring my megaphone just in case I saw someone I wanted to talk to and maybe yell at them about their APAC support or ask them, but didn't have to use it. But I wasn't able to catch him either way. And I did check his Instagram, his campaign Instagram account, and he definitely was making stupid videos at this event. And so, I went to go find someone who helped organize the event to ask, basically, 'cause I was really pissed off, to be quite honest. I was pissed off. And I asked, why are we platforming Eric Swalwell? And I asked an organizer, did we invite him or did he invite himself? And I was told he invited himself. And I did check his Instagram account and he did announce that he'd be there a couple of days ago. But this dude invited himself. He's not our congressman. He represents a district a couple hours away. And, I just, this is all part of the problem, right? There's this rally. There's no ask involved. There are no consequences. It felt like at that point, it was just people gathering, trying to have the best sign, the funniest sign with no consequences for, no asks. No, everyone contact your members' offices. Everyone, don't buy things on this one date in response unless the Trump administration starts to turn around on immigration and ICE and things like that. Nothing, no asks. It was like a social gathering, to be quite honest. That's what it felt like. I had a sign that said, "Vote for unbought primary challengers." And so a lot of people stopped to read my sign. I felt like I got a lot of side eyes over that, like this wasn't the time or place for that. But it is the time or place for that because we keep platforming these terrible Democrats. And then also what I was getting at was at this rally, also my congresswoman, the one I was challenging, Doris Matsui, was given a platform to speak. I missed her speech. I think I was singing off to the side. And then, nothing, no pushback from the MC or anything. And then Eric Swalwell spoke, like I said, and the MC, and I heard this from a few people, so it's not just me, but I felt that, as nice as this person was not matching the tone of the moment, basically. I think it was she who said basically that, "Oh, look, we have a celebrity, Eric Swalwell's in town," and just hyping everything up and hyping up all these Democrats like Doris Matsui and Eric Swalwell who helped create the conditions for Trump to win again. There was nothing after Doris Matsui spoke that I heard where she got off the stage and they said, "Hey, don't forget to hold town halls, Congresswoman." None of that. We all know she doesn't hold town halls. She refuses to, but she was given a platform to speak. And these are opportunities to push back, right? If we want to push back, if we really want to save our democracy, we need to start holding everyone accountable. And Doris Matsui is absolutely part of the problem. She's married to a billionaire, doesn't hold constituent meetings, doesn't hold town halls, rarely flies into the district where she's supposed to live full time. Actually, not full time, a majority of the time. And, I feel like I'm speaking Klingon when I try to tell fellow Democrats why the Democrats in office are part of the problem. I went to the Indivisible table and tried to speak to a couple of volunteers about why it was bad that Eric Swalwell was booked to speak. And they just kind of look at me and yeah, I know a lot. I know a lot more than most when it comes to these problematic Democrats, but then they just start to look past you because I don't think they know what to say. And then once again, you're feeling ignored and silenced. And that's how I feel with my Democratic legislators. I just know too much for my own good with regard to how House offices are supposed to work, for example, and how campaigns operate and all the money involved. And when I see all these Democrats clapping and cheering for terrible Democrats like Eric Swalwell and Doris Matsui, I feel like I'm on Earth too. I feel like I don't belong. I'll be quite honest. So, and then even the executive director of the Labor Council got up and spoke after Eric Swalwell, and he acknowledged Eric Swalwell and said something like, "Isn't it great he's here?" or something like that. So this is what Eric Swalwell likes to do. He likes to go anywhere where he can get a huge audience and no pushback. And he was also known for going to all these red districts in Northern California who had Republican congressmen and women who were not holding town halls. And he'd show up and he'd get treated like a rock star. People, I need you to realize, I need you to realize that these establishment corporate special interest bought Democrats like Eric Swalwell, who gets a lot of money from APAC, by the way, are part of the problem. This is why we lost. And when you've lost to Trump twice in non-consecutive terms after an insurrection, why would you keep supporting the same Democrats over and over again? If this were a team that lost this bad, you would replace the players and or the players, right? So I know that Eric Swalwell doesn't seem to have like a formidable or primary challenger from his own party, which is unfortunate, but that's because he's very entrenched. I get it, right? I tried to challenge a billionaire. She has a formidable opponent right now, but it's someone who has name recognition and already wide support because she's been doing the good work in here in this area for a long time. So, but it is so frustrating. It is so frustrating when these MSNBC pilled Democrats are just trying to have the best signs and clapping at these terrible Democrats, terrible Democrats. I mean, that's the reason I ran, right? I'm trying to replace a terrible Democrat. And I need people to wake up, like wake up for real. Also regarding Eric Swalwell, I forgot to say this. This is something that really pissed me off recently, was that he was on some CNN or MSNBC show and he was getting questioned by the host. You know, even though he's a congressman from California, someone asked him about what he thought about Zohran Mamdani winning the Democratic nomination for mayor of New York City. And with the most, you know, clueless look on his face too. And you could tell he was carefully choosing his words, although he still didn't choose them very well. He said, well, oh, first of all, I want to say Zohran Mamdani is a noted democratic socialist, which, you know, democratic socialist policy is actually a good policy, by the way. But people like to use that as a pejorative, socialist, you know. So when asked about Zohran Mamdani's win in the Democratic primary for mayor of New York City, Eric Swalwell said, well, I'm not a socialist. So he's using that as a pejorative. And then he said, and I don't agree with what he has said about the Jewish people. Excuse me, what did he say about the Jewish people? He didn't say anything about the Jewish people. He didn't say anything negative about the Jewish people, if that's where he was going with that. So, and then I just know that the door to his office in DC has two flags on it. It has a huge Ukrainian flag and then it has a huge Israeli flag and plenty of room for a Palestinian flag. It looks like the door is incomplete, actually. No Palestinian flag. And every once in a while, I would call his office to say, hey, is there a Palestinian flag yet on his door? And they say no. And we all know it's because his APAC handler wouldn't like it, right? These Democrats that are bought by APAC are just scared of their own shadow when it comes to APAC. And I don't know if any of you have listened completely to that Cory Booker interview on last week's episode of I've Had It, where those two women, Jennifer Welch and Angie Sullivan, grilled Cory Booker over his AIPAC support. And then they actually asked him if he thought Benjamin Netanyahu was a war criminal, and he couldn't answer the question. He deflected, and then they asked him again. And then he said, well, I think he's worse than Trump. But he would not answer the question about him being a war criminal. And after he got off the recording, Jennifer said, I see now what leftists see, because he could not even answer that question. You ask a progressive running for office and you ask them if Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal, and they say yes. You ask someone heavily endorsed by AIPAC like Cory Booker, and he can't answer the question. He cannot answer the question. So, you know, I just feel like this is an example. That was an interview though with Eric Swalwell that most people didn't catch, of course. And if they did catch it, they probably didn't think much about it because they probably don't even know anything about Zohran Mamdani. But I'm very online. I read the news all the time. I read about news from both parties. I listen to podcasts, even with from people I don't agree with, just to see what the other side is saying. But again, I need Democrats. I need Democrats in large to come out and hold their elected members of Congress, especially the Democrats, responsible. We are entering primary season here sooner than later. And what I need you to do is I need you to look at the primary challengers to the entrenched Democrats. I need you to look at them and then consider voting for them. This is just the primary. Remember, it's the primary. This is when you can hold people accountable overall, right? If there's a general and then there's a Democrat and a Republican, vote for the Democrat. But in the primary, this is how you can send a message that you mean business. You want change. You want them to disavow their special interests and corporate money. You want them to speak out more against how the party needs to change and more, right? With regard to APAC, so like, for those of you who don't know what it is, I should explain again. It's an acronym. It's AIPAC. It is the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee. Again, the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee. So this is an organization that represents, Israel's interests in their allyship with the United States, but they have a ton of donors who donate to APAC. And then they spend millions of dollars trying to oust whom they believe are problematic primary challengers, usually a progressive who has probably breathed very minimal but support for the Palestinian cause, right? So I was introduced to APAC in 2022. I'd heard of them before, but in 2022, I helped a race in Michigan wherein Andy Levin and Haley Stevens, two members of Congress, were pitted against each other because they had lost a seat. Michigan had lost a House seat like California and Illinois and New York had, because after the census, it was deemed that they had fewer people than before. So they either left or they weren't counted properly. So they redrew the district lines accordingly. And so those four states lost a House seat because congressional districts are based on an entire state's population. So this pitted two Democrats in office against each other, Andy Levin and Haley Stevens. They ran against each other for the same House seat. And Haley Stevens at one point stopped agreeing to debate Andy Levin because APAC came in and spent almost $1 million smearing her synagogue president colleague. Andy Levin's Jewish. And APAC, who represents, the Israeli allyship with the United States, smeared him to death. And the thing about APAC is that they will come in and they will smear a candidate to death and not even talk about Gaza or Israel. They'll talk about anything else. They just don't want them in office. And this was prior to October 7th. So APAC came in and spent about $1 million helping Haley Stevens. And there's even a viral video, and I have a copy of it somewhere, where a Jewish constituent, up to her and said, "Look, I think that APAC's influence makes Jews unsafe. I'm Jewish because they're interfering. And I just think that you should, basically not accept their money. So, why do you do that? Especially since APAC also endorsed over 100 election denying Republicans, anti-choice Republicans, A-rated NRA Republicans. APAC endorses people on both sides." And she ignored the question, and then she basically turned her back and walked away. She wouldn't even answer the question. So Andy Levin, known as the union organizer of Congress, lost. And so this is a lot of stuff that, again, isn't reported in the mainstream media. They choose whom they want to basically report on and elevate. And this is a reason why I have turned away from MSNBC, for example, and have tried to find my news online more than, tuning into MSNBC and CNN. I just want to share one more thing about how I have another example too of how an establishment Democrat regarding APAC still, you might have started to really come to know them or at least hear of them in the last election cycle when Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush, who are two very progressive members of Congress, were ousted due to AIPAC. So they both are supportive of Palestinians, right? And this is after October 7th as well. But Jamal Bowman, who represented a district in New York, and then Cori Bush, who represented a district in Missouri, they both ousted entrenched Democrats, corporate special interest bought Democrats. AIPAC spent the most, I think, in history to oust Jamal Bowman. They spent like $19 million to smear this guy to death, to put in place this very pro-Israel Democrat named George Latimer. And then Cori Bush lost her seat. I think AIPAC spent about $9 million to place Israel-friendly Wesley Bell. And what was really funny right after is that I was a top organizer for League of Conservation Voters, and they refused to consider a dual endorsement for me when I ran for Congress, even though I was one of their top organizers, and they endorsed Doris Matsui right away. But they went out and endorsed Wesley Bell right after he won. And this guy has no history of environmentalism or activism at all in his background whatsoever. And they just went out and endorsed him. They don't endorse every Democrat, but they would just endorse him, and he has no environmental activism or anything in his history that indicates he has worked against climate change. I'm sure he probably does in Congress, maybe, I don't know, but that's just how little you have to do to get the endorsements of these major organizations. An update on that as well. Cori Bush has launched another bid to get her seat back. And I think that that's actually okay because the anti-AIPAC sentiment is real now. More people are talking about it. And here's the other thing too. I have so many tangents to go off on. Congressman Seth Moulton, who I referenced earlier, he's a congressman from Massachusetts. He threw his hat in the ring to replace Nancy Pelosi back in 2016, 2017, like I was saying. So Seth Moulton, a Democrat in a very blue state, Massachusetts, military background, he came out, I think late last year, earlier this year, on a podcast, Pod Save America, and one of the hosts, John Lovett, interviewed him. And Seth Moulton basically threw trans kids under the bus as a reason that Democrats lost, all the wokeness and more. And even John Lovett pushed back on that and basically, chastised him for his tone and what he had just said, basically. And so that's what I remember of Seth Moulton. And I know that upset a lot of Democrats. I think even a member of his staff quit. That might have been someone else. That might have been another Democrat who threw trans kids under the bus, but I think a member of his staff quit. And so now Seth Moulton is going to challenge Ed Markey for his Senate seat. He just dropped a campaign a few days ago. Seth Moulton, one of the first things he said out the gate is, I'm not going to accept any more AIPAC money. I disavow their support, and I'm returning any funds I've accepted from them. So this moderate Democrat who has thrown trans kids under the bus is going to be one of the first Democrats out the gate to say, look, I'm not taking AIPAC money. I mean, he's doing it so he can win because he thinks that's a winning issue and a winning thing to run on. And I think it is as well. But why is he the first out of all these Democrats, even your faves, even Nancy Pelosi accepts AIPAC money. Adam Schiff accepts a ton of AIPAC money. Cory Booker, one of the worst. And, why is it Seth Moulton? So the Democrats are leaving this lane open, right, for some of the worst Democrats. And Marjorie Taylor Greene even has been coming out and speaking out against, the slaughter of innocent women and children in Gaza. These Democrats are letting these more fringe members of Congress, especially Marjorie Taylor Greene, and they got Seth Moulton, who, like I said, likes to throw trans kids under the bus and is very moderate. They get to take the lead on this now because the others don't have the spines to do so. And I know for a fact, Congressman Jimmy Gomez said that, I'm not going to say how I heard this, but he said that he can't disavow AIPAC support. He gets a lot of it. He cannot disavow his AIPAC support because they'll come after him. Because, they've already allowed it. They've already allowed all this AIPAC support. So that's what happens. If you turn on them, then they'll go after you and they'll support a challenger to you. And the thing about Jimmy Gomez is that he does have a formidable progressive challenger, and AIPAC is not going to help them for sure. But, this could be a time and place for them to find someone else to run against them. A lot of people think that this is what's going to happen in the Mills-Platner race for Senate in Maine, that Janet Mills is very Israel friendly. And so, that could happen. I want to get back to the I've Had It podcast. This is my own podcast. I'm going to keep talking about this other podcast though, because it is so good. And especially if Democrats want to see what I and others see with regard to these Democrats being bought, because Jennifer Welch and Angie Sullivan, who are the co-hosts, they're best friends on this podcast called I've Had It. It's just a few years old, and they have very recently started to platform Democrats, and they will actually grill them. They will grill them hard, especially over this AIPAC money. And they started calling out Democrats for accepting all of this AIPAC money and that they are bought by Israel. These are two wine moms from Oklahoma. They're both middle-aged blondes. One was raised atheist. The other one was raised a Christian, a very Christian Republican, and now she's an atheist and a liberal too. So these are perspectives. I'm a raging atheist, and I'm a very progressive person. And these two ladies have even said that they're basically DSA at this point. DSA is Democratic Socialists of America. They've had Hassan Piker on. I highly recommend that interview. It's very good. It's very funny as well, because they're all funny and they're all very smart. And then they had Zoran Mamdani on recently, and they even talk about why and how awful it is that Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer don't have the spines to endorse Zoran Mamdani. Basically, every other major Democrat in New York State has endorsed Zoran Mamdani for mayor of New York City. But Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, two heavily bought members of Congress by AIPAC, not even talking about their corporate interests, supporters, but the AIPAC, they can't endorse them. All Hakeem Jeffries keeps saying is that, oh, well, we'll have another talk. We'll have another talk. Even Kathy Hochul, the governor, came out and supported him. Jerry Nadler, a highly regarded chair, a committee chair who's going to retire, endorsed Zoran Mamdani for New York City mayor right after he won the primary. Like right away, no issues. It's just so obvious. And what I really hate is that these legislators, they act like we're stupid, but we see right through them. We see right through them. And that's what these two women called out with Cory Booker when they interviewed him too. I highly recommend you go find the interview from last week. It's on YouTube and on all those podcasting platforms. They even had Jeffrey Duncan on. So going back to these ladies, this is something that I think that they could do. They have the platform for it. Is they're inviting Democrats on and they're grilling them, which, in essence could mean that they might stop coming on if they know they're going to have to answer hard questions about AIPAC and more. And that's the reason why I think these mainstream media hosts don't ask them hard questions or push back on like totally untruthful claims they make about the Progressive Party or just the progressive faction or whatever else, is because they want guests on their show. They just have slots to fill. They book any Democrat to come on. If they ask them hard questions, they're not going to come back, right? So anyway, these ladies don't care. So, and actually Cory Booker invited himself onto their show, but he still got eviscerated. What I think they should do is they should invite every AIPAC Dem onto their show, all of them, including my Congresswoman, Doris Matsui. And then they should report back when they get denials or when they don't respond. And they should keep asking. They should keep asking. If there's nothing problematic about this AIPAC support, then they should have no problem going on the show, right? And they've had Eric Swalwell on before. That was one time, it was several months ago, and I had been listening to them and I liked them. And then they had Eric Swalwell on, and I remember thinking, oh, I don't know if I can listen to this anymore because they didn't ask him any hard questions. He's so awful. He's so awful. Even John Levitt on Pod Save America had him on his show the other day. We have to stop it. We have to hold these people accountable. Anyway, but so they need to invite every AIPAC Dem onto their show and report back who says no or who keeps refusing to respond. And they should start with Eric Swalwell, who they've had on before. And they've had Hakeem Jeffries on it before too and everything. And they've criticized him heavily. But they need to have Eric Swalwell back on to talk about that and ask him why he has a problem endorsing Zoran Mamdani, even though he's from California, but he was definitely asked about it. And then they need to ask them these hard questions about AIPAC. They need to ask them, will you disavow it moving ahead? Because we know that this is the new litmus test, is accepting AIPAC support. So if you're civic minded and politically minded and read a lot of news, you might have heard of Neera Tanden. So she used to be a government official. I think she worked under Obama. Can't remember off the top of my head. I think she helps run a think tank right now, but She was considered too for a role in the Biden administration, but got tanked basically because I think some people found some old tweets of her. And she honestly is just very still, very much in the corporate special interest bot Democrat mindset. So I've seen her tweet a lot lately about how, we wouldn't be in this mess if people had just voted for Kamala Harris. And she's one of many who do that. And she's just been really active on this topic the last few days. What I want to say about this, though, this is something that, you know, um, I see a lot of people, even people I know, saying, and they're continue to miss the mark. And basically, Kamala Harris said repeatedly that she had to earn every vote. That's why people campaign. Those are my words. That's why people campaign. They campaign to compel people to vote for them. So when people keep saying, well, they could have voted for Kamala Harris didn't earn their vote, right? And I used to feel like that way too a long time ago. And I'd say, you have to vote for harm reduction. You have to vote for the perceived lesser of two evils. You just have to do it. And for the first time this election cycle, this reliable Dem, this good Dem voter who's volunteered for and worked for Democratic candidates and members of the House and the Senate and knocked doors more than most, I had a hard time voting for Kamala Harris. I did. And I worked for League of Conservation Voters, where I called thousands of their members to get them to volunteer for phone banks, canvases, text banks, and more, writing letters, even postcards to support Kamala Harris. And there were many members who I called who said that they didn't think they could vote for Kamala Harris over Gaza. And in our debrief after this huge loss, there were organizers from League of Conservation Voters in a Zoom chat who said that they tried to speak to the Harris organizers on the ground about what they were hearing from people, and they just didn't want to hear it. And I mean, I was taking a sewing class on how to use my sewing machine last year too. This is before the election, and the little old ladies in my class were like, I don't know if I can vote for Kamala Harris. My husband said he may not vote for her over Gaza. It's all over Gaza. So, I was Kamala pilled when she first got in. I was so excited. I thought, oh, finally, we're gonna deal with Gaza now, right? Too, like, obviously, we're gonna get someone who might consider expanding the Supreme Court because Biden didn't want to do it. Someone who supports Medicare for all and more. And then, as soon as she did the "I'm speaking" nonsense, I knew it was over for me. I mean, I still voted for her, but I sensed it was over because the thing that's most annoying online is when you see people say, well, you should have voted for Kamala Harris because she would have been the most easily moved. That's why people were protesting her. That's why people were protesting her. When you say, why don't you go protest Republicans? Because we knew at the time that Kamala Harris would be more easily moved, right? All of us knew that, but she wasn't moving. And then she said on The View that she wouldn't do anything different than Biden. And then she said, I'm speaking to Palestinian protesters, some of whom might have lost people over in Gaza from the genocide happening over there. So, you have to look at it that way, right? So we did. And then now they're saying, well, why aren't they protesting at Republicans right now? Where all the protesters are gone. That just shows your algorithm. There are people protesting Trump all the time and Republicans. First off, you should go follow Code Pink. They're always going after Republicans. They're following them into their brunches, their luncheons, holding them accountable. They're getting arrested left and right. They're in committee hearings. They protest Trump at his events. They do. It just shows what you pay attention to on your feed. Because if you actually started to look for those videos, then your algorithm will start showing you more. And I see people on TV, these pundits, these experts, so-called experts, Bill Maher, oh God, Bill Maher, all these people saying, where is everyone? Why aren't they protesting now? They are. They are. It's just you don't see them because it doesn't have Kamala Harris in it. So, something with Kamala Harris will start appearing in your feed and you'll see the protesters against her, but you won't see these protesters going after, the most random Republican in the hallways of Congress or at their events. You don't see it because your algorithm tells you what you should look at based on what you've seen and what you like in the past. That's how that works. So anyway, back to Neera Tanden. Don't care for her. And she just continues to, act like campaigns don't matter, that pivoting right and traveling around with Liz Cheney was not helpful. Some people said it was only once or twice. It's the perception. And I volunteered for Kamala Harris's Attorney General inauguration in 2015 in Sacramento. That's the first time I saw, what's his name, Gavin Newsom, and how big his hair was and how wide his teeth are, by the way. I just need people to I just wish people would understand that if someone like me, who was a reliable Dem voter, if even I thought, like, I don't think I can vote for Kamala Harris. I did, but I didn't want to. You know, I was not excited to do so. And while it's really easy to dunk on people who don't come out to vote or who vote for Trump, you need to figure out, you need to help figure out, we all need to figure out how we can get new voters or get voters back, because we're still in this mindset that they want to be right more than they want to win, right? So you have to think about it. Do I want to be right or do I want to win? Right? We don't want people to keep voting for terrible Republicans who are going to double the ICE budget. We don't want people to keep voting for what ICE is doing. We don't want to keep voting for people who are dismantling the Constitution. So just moving back to the No Kings protest, that felt a lot like it felt like it was misguided nationwide. I felt like the MC was a little too like, "Oh, this is a celebration." No, this is supposed to be a fight. This is supposed to be a fight. And then elevating these problematic Democrats without any type of pushback. Like I said, the easiest thing they could have done with Doris Matsui is say, "Hey, don't forget to have a town hall," at least something like that, or some kind of action item at the end. Call your members of Congress. I already know that's not going to work with Eric Swalwell and Doris Matsui because I call and email their offices all the time and they ignore me. They cater to their special interest donors and their corporate donors. But, they needed to plant that seed. That would have been an easy ask by the MC. Nothing, not one thing. So these people are coming to this event and they're making their funny signs and then they're going. And then what's next? What is next? I help lead the canvases for Yes on Prop 50 on Sundays in Oak Park. And I know we got at least one new person who signed up because they went to the No Kings event the day before. So, for those of you who don't know, I went over it extensively in my first episode, but Proposition 50, it's called the Election Rigging Response Act. And California has a special election happening on November 4th. You can vote before then, but you have until November 4th to mail in or send back your mailed ballot voting yes or no on this proposition, which would allow California basically to temporarily redistrict the state as to eliminate 5 Republican seats. We only have 9 Republicans in California right now. There are some swing districts, but right now we only have 9 Republicans, and so they will gerrymander the seats so much that we will lose 5 Republican seats, and that is just in response to what Texas is doing, where they are going to eliminate 5 Democratic seats. So it's only in response to that. It's accountability because otherwise they can just do whatever they want, right? So it's really going to depend on voter turnout. So just going back though to these canvases, it is important that we go door to door to talk to Democrats and ensure that they vote yes on Prop 50. And if you have never canvassed before, trust me, I used to feel the exact same way. I thought I have anxiety, I'm too shy. What if they ask me a question I don't know the answer to? And that was with candidates who have deep platforms, right? So it's actually not a big deal. But if you've never canvassed before, and a lot of people who are doing this have not canvassed before, this is a great first step. This is like a great trial run because you're only going door to door to talk about this one very easy thing to talk about, right? It's so easy. You're just asking them about their support or explaining things to them. And then you ask them if they also want to volunteer. That's basically it. And you can go with a buddy. So you can go on mobilize.us. So it's mobilize.us. And your city, if you put in Sacramento, for instance, you'll see a bunch of opportunities to canvass. Again, I'm at the one in Oak Park on Sundays at 11 a.m. And these will be held until the days before the November 4th election. So it's really important that we vote yes, that you remind your friends and family to do so because people can forget. And make a plan to vote yourself. Today actually is the last day to register to vote. If this gets published tomorrow, it was yesterday, the 20th. So I'm going to try and get this published today, but you can still register to vote all the way up until election day. It just becomes a bit trickier when you can register today and still have the ballot package mailed to you, so you don't have to go anywhere. Otherwise, you have to go someplace. So those were that. Hey, that was my first episode. Basically, that's not all about me, I guess, but I had joked that I was gonna have a new segment hopefully every episode where I talk about a bad dem, and I was going to call it maybe something like donkey trouble, something silly like that. I think I did that with Eric Swalwell. So let's just say that I did donkey trouble today with Eric Swalwell. I will definitely cover other ones. I just know a lot about senators and House representatives because of the work I've done over the years. So, I mean, you could basically ask me the most obscure member of Congress, and I would know what state they're from, what party they're from, and around when they were elected, just because of the work I do. I spend a lot of my days scheduling meetings with members of Congress. So, when I see a new name pop up, especially after an election cycle, I look them up and then I just remember. So that's actually something that would also make me a really good member of Congress, by the way, because I already know who I could work with, even based on little, basically because I know if they have a family member who's struggling with a certain disease or something. So with regard to a healthcare bill, I know exactly who I can reach out to. So, and one more thing, yes, I'm still considering running for Congress. I am. I ran for Congress in the 7th district. That is currently where I live. I live 4/10 of a mile from the district border from District 6. And I went to Sac State, which is in this district. I've a fifth generation Sacramentan. I've grown up all and lived around all this area. But I grew up in Citrus Heights and went to school in Orangevale, Fair Oaks, and Citrus Heights, and I spent a lot of time in Carmichael as well. And then as an adult, after I moved home to help take care of my mom before she died of cancer, I lived in the Roseville area for several years. So this new 6th district, especially if Prop 50 passes, this new 6th district, I will know like the back of my hand. And if I were to hop in the race based on who's running right now, I would be the only person from the district. And I think this is an opportunity for me to represent my hometown and still get someone with my background, my lived experiences into Congress. So I have people who are still supporting this run, but like I said, I'm a working class renter. So it was very difficult to run against Doris Matsui. In fact, I'm probably going to owe money. In the end, I didn't raise enough to pay back what I spent, mostly because I'm paying the people to do my finances because I couldn't do that myself and run for office. And I'm gonna have to file an end of year report as well. So I still have an ActBlue that's open if anyone would like to consider contributing to that. And actually, that reminds me as well. One disclaimer is that I am paying for this podcast myself with my own money, and I'm producing it myself. I'm allowed to talk about my campaign, my past campaign, my maybe future campaign, and my website and my platform and ActBlue because it's free speech. So again, this podcast is not connected in any way to my campaign. So that makes us in the clear. But again, thank you for listening. I hope I didn't annoy you too much. And, feel free to send me any emails at disruptorpoliticspodcast@gmail.com. Again, disruptorpoliticspodcast@gmail.com. Please like, share, and subscribe to this podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever. I'm on Instagram and TikTok and Twitter and YouTube. Most of my handles are at Disruptor Paul Pod, POLPOD. So Disruptor Paul Pod, because Disruptor Politics was too long of a name to have as a handle. On YouTube, I am actually at Disruptor Politics because that was a mistake, but I'm trying to change it. So for right now, you can find me on every social, most of them at Disruptor Paul Pod. So again, thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to all that. I really appreciate you. Hang in there.